Your field notebook will be one of the most important field tools that you will deploy during field camp and throughout your career. So I'd like to say a few words about the field notebook per se and how you're going to use it. So as you can see from these pictures, there are a variety of settings where the field notebook can come into play, including underwater. And in general, what you're trying to do here is provide a lasting and accessible record of the information that you're encountering in the field. So write it down, have it in print so it will be available forever. So the book itself. What I would recommend is that you use a durable, hardbound, brightly colored notebook. You want this thing to last a long time, and so it should be hardbound. You don't want it to be bent up or get folded and creased. In some cases, we have students use softbound notebooks, and I must say these just don't last through field camp. You don't want to use this kind of book because it just doesn't have the durability. The things you then record in your notebook have a larger chance of being lost in a softbound book. So get a hardbound book. Should be brightly colored, so if you leave it someplace, you can spot it from a distance. And there are a variety of notebook formats that are available. Here are some from one of the catalogs, and to some extent, this is personal preference. I generally like a notebook that has lines on it for writing, and some kind of graph paper for doing sketches or plots, or perhaps writing down data with columns. Notebooks are available with waterproof paper. They cost a little bit more. And in general, the ones that are on regular paper work just fine. But if you happen to be working on a stream and you drop the notebook in, or if you're caught out in the rain and the notebook gets wet, then the waterproof paper is going to be really a good idea, because if you get a regular paper notebook wet, then there can be a lot of damage done to the paper. And so in addition to the notebook, I often use a storage clipboard, such as the one shown here. You should definitely have a clipboard of some sort so you can have a page-sized piece of paper that you write on. And in this case, the storage clipboard has a compartment down here where you can put things. Either pieces of paper that you've either already written on and used for mapping, say, or they could be other things here. I guess a flashlight or pens and a protractor is also often something that I would carry down here. And so this is a convenient thing. There are a variety of places where you can get notebooks and clipboards. This is a place, the forestry suppliers, where we get our notebooks. Right in the Rain is a manufacturer. I don't really mean to endorse these places, other than, but I think it would probably be helpful to just give you an option or give you a suggestion, at least as a place to look initially. So the first thing that you should do when you get your notebook, write your name in it, write the title of the book. Basically, the title is going to be the things that you're recording in it, at least at the beginning. Write this on the outside of the book. That's so that you can tell your book apart from other people's books. Also, write your name, address, phone number, and perhaps other contact information in indelible ink on the inside cover. So do this first. Your field notebook will be the most important thing that you have in your pack, and if you lose it, you will be in deep trouble. in field camp, it might not be that big a deal. If you lose it, we can round up another one. But if you lose this book on the job, that could be really serious trouble. So you want to do everything you can to ensure that you would get the book back if it gets separated from you. So first thing, write your name on the outside and write your name and address and other contact info on the inside with indelible marker. Okay, so the general format that you'll use each day, I would recommend that you start the description of the task for that day, whether it's a field trip or some kind of field exercise or activity, with just general overview information. This is setting the stage of what's going to happen for the rest of the day. For example, if you were going on a field trip, well, I guess in general, I would start off with the date, the location, and the names and affiliations of leaders of the trip. This is really geared for an activity that would be a field trip, for example. If you're not on a field trip but you're just out doing some work, then maybe you include the names of the people that you're working with, the other people who would be present. Weather is also an important thing to include. You may not realize it at the time, but some of the measurements that you're making may depend on the weather. So having that information can be helpful down the road. Okay, so you're going to write that stuff down each day, and then probably you'll have multiple pages that you want to include for an active day. And so each new page should contain the date, the location, and a page number. Some of the notebooks are already have numbered pages, so in that case you wouldn't need to number it, but you would want to include a date and a location. And the reason for this is so that when you write this stuff down on that page, you can tell what project, what activity, what the timing is relative to the other stuff that's going on in the notebook. Now, when you look at the notebook itself, this will be clear because the pages will be in order, but you're going to photocopy this notebook, and in that case, the photocopies may get mixed up, and you want to have some way to tell the sequence of the pages and to tell what pages go together. So I would just write that stuff down. This is another thing that will help keep you organized. Table of contents. What you'll find is these notebooks will contain a lot of information. And so if you leave a page or a couple pages blank at the beginning, then as you fill up the notebook, you create a table of contents, or write down what is included in that book and the pages where it's included. So for field camp, we'll have various different activities, and you can say in the table of contents what the page ranges of those activities are. Down the road, you'll have different projects and various different ways to group the contents of the book and include it in a table of contents. So the handwriting, my handwriting is pretty bad. I can read it, but sometimes people have difficulty reading my handwriting. But when I take field notes, I make a concerted effort to make my handwriting better than it would normally be. And that's because I want to make sure that I can read it down the road, and I want to make sure that if somebody else needs to read my book, that they can do it. In general, when you take notes and you're on the job, that field notebook is property of the project or the client that you're working for or your company. And so you need to be able to make the information in the book accessible to anyone. So write cleanly, clearly, and if your handwriting is normally messy, make an effort to have it be neat under these circumstances. So for writing notes, In professional situations, you'll probably be required to take the notes in ink, and that's because in professional situations, notebooks are potentially going to be legal documents that describe a project. They can be subpoenaed and entered in court, and so it's important to be able to show that these notebooks have not been altered. Now, we're not going to do that for field camp, so you can use a pencil for your notes in field camp. That's fine. But I would start to get in the habit of using pen. Um, One thing, I generally use a pen when I take field notes, with one exception though. When I'm drawing sketches, I'll use a pencil because when you're drawing sketches, you might draw a couple lines and want to change them, and so in that case, of course, pencil is going to be the way to go. But what you'll find is if you're using pencil, it's going to be a good idea to use a hard lead pencil, and that's because the pencil will smear and kind of make a mess. It'll transfer the graphite from the pencil will transfer from the page where you write it to the facing page, and so if you use lead that's a little bit harder than your normal number 2 pencil, then it'll help prevent this. Witnessing is something that is often done in professional settings, and basically what's involved here is that your field partner or somebody other than you will take a look at the notebook and will witness it, usually with their initials. This is certainly something that's done all the time for lab notebooks, and it's done for field notebooks in hydrogeologic settings situations as well. This is kind of to facilitate using these notebooks in court if that's necessary. Now, we aren't going to use the notebooks in court, and we're not going to do witnessing, but this is something that I just wanted to point out is an aspect of the field notebook that you will encounter in a professional situation. Now, just in terms of style, what I would do is err on the side of too much detail rather than too little. You don't necessarily know what's going to be important. So as you take your notes, you should include observations that seem to be relevant. You don't necessarily need to have this write down. Well, I guess I would just say err on the side of too much detail rather than too little, because you don't really know what would be important. And also in terms of style, write the notes in real time to the extent that you can. So something happens, you write it down. In some cases, this is difficult. You're in an awkward situation, and maybe you're in the middle of a stream and the water's flowing fast, for example, and you need to make sure that you have your hands full, and so you just really can't get your notebook out. I guess in that situation, or situations where you can't write it down in real time, I would urge you to write the notes down as soon as possible. If you're generating data in the middle of a stream and you can't write it down, then you probably need to yell over to the bank and have somebody write it down for you. In other situations, you may write down notes afterwards, but I would just urge you to do it as close to real time as possible. Don't wait till the end of the day to recap your notes. You just don't have the recollection of the details if you do that. So in a lot of cases, you'll be moving around. In any case, the location, the basic location where you're making the measurements will be important. And so I'd recommend describing locations using 2 approaches. One is descriptive text. You just write down in prose where you are. So here's an example. The well is 50 feet southwest of the corner of the parking lot. And presumably from the context of the notes, you would know what parking lot you're talking about here. So that's text. In addition to that, I would use your GPS and write down the location of the point or the place you're talking about using UTM or lat longe. Here's an example of UTM coordinates to describe it unambiguously in this kind of format. So this really gives you two ways to describe it. This way, the UTM coordinates is more objective, and it may be more accurate, maybe not. There's an intrinsic error in these in the use of GPS. But I guess the important thing is that you have both. One thing that happens is that there may be an error in your GPS. It's an electronic instrument. If you're writing the coordinates down, you may make an error writing down. If you're recording it within the unit, then you probably won't have an error writing it down. But what if the unit just simply fails? That can certainly happen, and so having this text description is going to be a key backup. Also, this has this is going to be the UTM is going to be an important way to describe it unambiguously. But if you just look at those numbers and you don't have this plotted up, or you don't have access to something to a map, say, with these coordinates, then it's going to be hard to make sense out of it. So in that case, the text is going to be much more valuable. So both these modes of recording locations will be important. So you'll be taking photos. Photos these days are very easy to take, and they do a great job of describing some things, some aspects of field sites. What you need to do is, in your notebook, describe the photo that has been taken. So when you take a photo, it'll be assigned some kind of number typically, and what I would do is have in my notes what that photo is showing. Now you may think that, well, I'm gonna just remember, and maybe you will, but you may also not remember just exactly the details of what is being shown in the photo. So describing that in your notes will help provide the context and make the photo more valuable. So even though photos are great, they're easy to take these days. Many people will have a camera on their phone, so you can take them that way, or you could take better quality pictures with a camera, just a standalone camera. But in fact, what you'll find is that photos, they capture lots of detail, and in some cases having all of that detail actually obscures what you're trying to show, because you may want to show just the bare essence of a particular scene, and it may be cluttered up with lots of things that's hard to, and it'll make the essence hard to actually discern. So I would really recommend using sketches in your notebook that show the important aspects. So you can just draw this by hand. Whenever you do this, I would include a scale or and a north arrow if it's a map, and a scale and the bearing if it's a cross section. So draw it out and then label the sketch. So if it may not be immediately apparent what is being shown in the sketch, so label it. And in some cases, what you can do is have a sketch that is paired with a photograph. So the sketch kind of shows the main important aspects, and the photograph would have the details there. In other cases, you can have a photograph that serves as a base for mapping. So if you wanted to map an outcrop, for example, you could take a photograph and then use the photograph as the base and draw in contacts on the photograph. So that's kind of a hybrid technique of both taking pictures and sketching. So I would use this technique a lot for both in mapping and in cross section and perhaps other ways to depict what's important. So here's some examples of some sketches. Here's an outcrop and stratigraphic section drawn out where the units are sketched here, and then there's a description. And here's a picture from the Henry Mountains in Utah that was drawn by a geologist in, I think it was the late 1800s, around 1870, and this is the first time this area had been explored by a modern geologic crew. And I actually worked in this area, and this is really just a fantastic sketch. This is what the mountain looked like. So they didn't have a camera, or they weren't able to use it, and so they drew a sketch, and this has some of the important details. These little numbers here are keys to descriptions of those particular areas. So use this technique to to identify and highlight important aspects of what you're seeing in the field. So in addition to your field notebook, you'll also be using 8.5 by 11 sheets or perhaps other sheets of paper for mapping and plotting and various other things. And so you want to keep that material together, organized and accessible, and a loose leaf binder is a good thing to have for this. So that would be another field tool that would help you stay organized. Now, I mentioned earlier that your field notebook will be among your most valuable field tools, probably actually your most valuable, period. And so you need to protect your investment, and a good way to do this is to just simply copy it using a photocopier. These days you can make a copy and scan it to a PDF without even having a hard copy. And so I would recommend doing this fairly regularly. That will be somewhat of a safeguard against the disaster of losing your notebook. And one thing too, just as a matter of style, that I should point out, you should write down your ideas and insights and plans for what you want to do next. In some cases, people are thinking that your field notebook should just really include basic data, and it should certainly do that. But as you are thinking about the problem, as you get some insights, write them down. You'll thank yourself for doing this down the road when you need to write up descriptions and reports, and these insights will then be important. Don't rely just on your memory. So jot them down. The field notebooks then will have a wide range of material: sketches, data, ideas, and so on. Okay, so that's really just a quick overview of field notebooks.